Welcome to computer animation class using Adobe After Effects. When you open up After Effects, you are going to see a panel that looks like this. I kind of hate this panel, but it does show you some of the things you've done in the past, recent projects. You can click New Project, but I like to just close this thing and you're going to end up in the same exact place, the main Adobe After Effects interface. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is it has created an untitled project for you. And what many people do is they just start working and they don't pay attention to that. And you could be working for 45 minutes and it is not really saved it anywhere. Where is this untitled project? So file save is the first thing you do in After Effects. Make sure you know where you're going to put it. Now you see that it has an actual designation of where it put and what it's called, and I know where it is. So that's the first thing that I always do in After Effects. This is the default workspace. You can see the workspaces listed right here. I like to use for beginners, I would suggest default or standard. And you can see you can click back and forth. Of course, you can go into learn and there's all kind of basic things that Adobe has for you. Let's go back to default. What I like about default is all of the main panels that you're going to need are usually kind of right here, and it will add them if you grab a tool. If the panel is not open, it'll put it there for you. To see everything in a panel, just click once on the word and it will open up the panel all the way for you. So just click once again, and it's going to close the panel. If you double click on the words, it's going to open it up full screen. And that scares a lot of people. If you want to put it back the way it was, just double click on the word. So once again, click once to open up the panel, click once to close the panel. If you need to see a bigger version, double click and it will go to full screen. And that will help you if you're on a small laptop at home. So once again, double click. You can also click the tilde key, which is to the left of your keyboard. The tilde key will make things bigger or smaller. Anything that you're on, it will make bigger and smaller. For instance, if I'm on this menu and I click tilde, it will become full screen. Click tilde again, and it's back to normal. Click here, tilde, tilde. And once again, double click will make it full screen. Double click on the word, and it will go down to nothing. Now notice on this says none. If you are used to Premiere Pro, you would notice this is normally where your sequence is. We do not have sequences in After Effects. After Effects is a compositor, not a sequencer. A sequencer is horizontal. It goes from left to right. You put the first clip, the second clip, the third clip, the fourth clip. In After Effects, we are dealing with a composition that composites things one on top of the other. So it is dealing more with vertical. First layer, second layer, third layer. So this is not called a sequence, it is called a composition. This to the left is the project or the bin. It's where we're going to put all of our media. And this is where we're going to view our composition here in the middle. The only thing when you're in the default workspace is it does not have something we are used to for Premiere Pro, which is Effect Control. So go to Window and find Effect Control. It's down here. And it's going to put it right where we're used to it if you are a Premiere Pro editor. So let's go back to the project menu and put some stuff in there. First off, we need to create a composition. You can do this by right-clicking and saying New Composition, or I like to click right here on the New Item button, and it's going to pop up Composition Settings. So I'm going to go ahead and call this composition something. I'm going to call this Right Name. We do have the main presets that people are used to. I prefer to use HDV or Full HD. Let's go ahead and go for Full HD today. And you can see it's 1920 by 1080 square pixels, frame rate of 30. And you can see these other, we've got full resolution, starting time code. This is one of the problems. It does default to have 30-second duration, which realize that when we're doing complex animations, that is going to be way too long. If you're rendering a complex 3D animation, you need it to be exactly as long as it needs to be and have no extra, because you don't want your computer having to chug out extra stuff that is not necessary. So 30 seconds is almost always way too long, and you can change that in your preferences, but I just change it each time. So I'm going to click 8 seconds, so that's 8.00. If you just click 8, it's going to be 8 frames. So please make sure to put the trailing zeros or you will have 8 frames. So 8.00, and we're going to hit OK. We now have a composition called Write Name, and you can look up here and see that it is 1920 by 1080. It is 8 seconds long, and it is 30 frames per second. And you can see down here in the composition window, we do have a composition. I'm going to go down into my composition, right click and say New Solid. You may be familiar with, in Premiere, the color map that you can create. This is the same thing as a color map, but it's called a solid because when we get into 3D, we can turn this into a cube or a square. So make a new solid, and it's going to default to be black. You can make this whatever color you want. It really doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter. And you can see that it names it whatever color you have chosen, and it's going to make it the size of our composition. So we're going to hit OK. And we now have a solid that is just there on the screen. Now, in your composition window, if you put your mouse over the top of the composition and scroll your mouse in and out, you will zoom in and out. So you do not have to hit Alt like you do in other programs. Just scroll your mouse in and out. Now, if you are zoomed way in and you need to be able to see, press and hold down the space bar, and you will get the hand tool so that you can move around. So that is just scroll your mouse for zoom, space bar for the hand tool. Another thing that happens is if you double click right here, you are going to open up the layer menu. Do you see that we have the composition panel and the layer panel? This is the actual layer. There is a difference. So if you double click, once again, if you double click, it is going to open up that individual layer. Right now we only have one layer, but think about this. We could have multiple layers down here. And if you need to deal with just one layer, you can double click on it to open up the layer menu. So let's go down to the composition window. This may look a little bit different on your computer than mine. There's a variety of reasons. You can expand and collapse the views. There's different types of tools that you can open and close. So if you want to kind of mess with this for a second, but it should in general look like mine. These are the basic tools that you will need. The first one you need to understand is the eyeball tool. Obviously, if you turn off the eyeball, you cannot see it anymore. The next thing is that there is a caret that you can swirl open to see the main transform tools that are always there. These are the default effects in transform that are on every layer. So we have anchor point, position, scale, rotation. And obviously if I start scaling it, it is going to scale. You can see that it's doing that. We can rotate it, all that kind of stuff. If you want to reset it, you see there's a generic reset up here for everything in transform. Or if you just wanted to reset rotation, right click and there is a reset just for rotation. Notice it left my scale alone. I am going to reset all of them at this time. And you may notice that there are a bunch of little keyframe things here, meaning that we can animate all of these separate things. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down and animate a little bit just to show you what's happening. So if I wanted to animate the scale, I can use basic keyframing by turning on my animation. And notice it has made a keyframe for me. And then say in 2 seconds, I want it to scale up a little bit. I'm just going to click and drag my mouse to the right. Let's see. Hit the space bar for play. And I've made my first basic animation. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I don't want to use that right now. Let's go back to normal, reset everything. That's the basic idea of what's happening. Let's actually do our project now. I'm going to double click on this layer so that I get the layer panel. And I'm going to go grab a first of one of our tools. You can see that the toolbar is up here and almost everything can be done with just the basic selection tool. Today we're going to use the brush tool. And when you click on the brush tool, you will notice that this paint thing has popped open and you also have a brushes panel. So let's look at that a little bit better. It defaults to be this really, really ugly red. So you can change that foreground color to anything that is not this color of your background. Just by double clicking on it, you could make it blue, you could make it whatever color you want. I'm actually going to write with white. So what other choices we have here? This would be our blending mode. If you've used Photoshop before, we'll talk about those more in another lecture. We do want it to be on RGBA so that we can use transparency, and we do want it to be on constant. The main brush we're using should be the just default brush. So now that we've got the paint set up the way we want, I'm going to make sure my playhead is back at the beginning, and I'm going to draw with one continuous movement my name. Now I want you to notice what has happened down here in our composition. I now have something new that has appeared called effects. I'm going to swirl that down to open it. You can see it has added paint effect, and it has a bunch of choices. So let's go ahead and start looking at that. The first thing I want to see is this paint on transparent. I do want to turn that on. Notice the red background has gone away. This is why I told you it doesn't matter what color your solid is, because we're just going to have it on transparent. Why are we going to do that? Well, because now we can put this over anything else. Let me get a piece of video for you real quick. Okay, so I've just imported some video, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that down on our composition. And you can see that now this is over that video. So simply just turning off paint on transparent makes this a more interesting situation. I'm actually going to get rid of that video for right now. So we're going to turn on paint on transparent. Let's look at the other things it has. If we open up brush, here's the basic path. Stroke options. Let's see what happens if we, So I think, notice that this is keyframeable. So we could keyframe how this starts and stops. The color we could change. Make it kind of yellow. The diameter. In fact, let's go ahead and mess with some keyframing. Let's have the diameter change. So I'm going to start at 1. Then maybe after a few frames, let's go up really big. Then after a few frames, we're going to go back down normal. Notice anytime I make a change, it automatically makes a keyframe. Let's hit the space bar to make it play. Whoa. That's a cool effect. I wish it would do that a lot. I'm just going to click and drag, get all of those keyframes. Control C, Control V. Control V for paste. Copy paste. Let me go back to the beginning, hit the space bar again. Whoa. So do you see that all of these little choices we have? Opacity. Let's kind of do a fade up. I'm going to go ahead and turn on keyframing, and I'm going to have it start at 0 opacity. Then by the time it gets to here, I want it to be at 100. Perfect. All right, and then of course, regular compositing and transform, scale, rotation, all of that kind of stuff. Hopefully this will show you how many different choices you have. Lots and lots of choices. I'm going to close this all the way because I want to show you a couple of keystrokes that are useful. When you have a layer that has effects added to it, you can click E and it's going to open up the effect. So an E button is very useful. It also works with multiple layers. So you could have a lot of layers selected. Just click the E button and it will tell you any effect that is open. Click the U button, it's going to show you anything on that layer that has keyframes associated with it. So notice because we changed both diameter and opacity, it opened those up, but it didn't open up anything else. This is going to be very useful when you have lots and lots of layers. You're not going to have enough room to have everything open at one time. So the U button and the E button are very, very useful. Now that we've done all this, we're actually going to delete it and do something else. So click on the word paint and click delete. It has now deleted all of that we did because there's an easier way to do this. Make sure you double click to be in the layer panel. Grab your brush tool. This time instead of constant, click right on. Make sure you are at the beginning of the composition and then write your name again. It has went ahead and made keyframes. Let's hit spacebar for play. And you can see it drawing on. Let me undo that, Control Z, and I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to draw a lot slower. Look at the keyframes. It actually timed it out while I was doing it. So let's watch that spacebar. A lot slower. Of course, we can open this up, and if we want it to go faster than that, we just move our keyframes closer together. Now remember that we made this 8 seconds long. If you take more than 8 seconds to draw this, it's going to cut it off before you finish your name. So now that I've got that drawing on there, let's start getting a little bit more interesting with this. I'm going to go ahead and paint on transparency on, go back to my composition window, and let's go into effects and presets and add some fun things to this. The first one that I like to use is called, just type in wiggle, and I like the one called Wiggle Gelatin. Should pick that up and drag that and drop it onto the solid. And notice here in Effects Control, it has added a lot of new effects. The paint is what we put on there. But now I have Wiggle Gelatin and Transform, all kind of stuff it's added, all kind of things. Let's go ahead and see what it did. Yeah, Wiggle Gelatin is kind of fun. So if you'd like to try that effect, that's a good one. Another one that's good is CC Light. We want this CC Light Burst. Throw that one on there. Yeah, that one's pretty cool. And let's look and see what we can animate here. I would animate the length, the ray length. So let's go ahead and put that to 0. When it starts, I'm going to go ahead and move my playhead a little bit and then just have that ray length and then go maybe back to 0. Pretty cool. Now let's put this on a good background. I want you to make another solid, so just right click and say New Solid. And I would go ahead and make this one a dark blue, but it kind of doesn't matter because you're going to choose your own background. Pick that up and make sure it's on the bottom, and you should be able to see the dark blue behind it. And now I want you to go into Animation Presets and go to Backgrounds. There are a bunch of these really cool presets. I like Sender. Go ahead and throw that on there. That one's pretty cool. I'm going to hit undo. Let's look and see what else we have. Apparition. Oh, now what just happened there is I accidentally threw Apparition on the top solid, which is a kind of cool effect, but not what I was wanting. So let me hit undo. Make sure you are putting it on the background layer. There we go. So there you go. That was a pretty simple little project, but we actually learned a lot. We learned how to create solids. We used the brush tool. We learned to double click on the layers in composition to get the layers menu. We used the E button, the U button. We used the wiggler. We used preset animation backgrounds, and we learned 2 new effects.